What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Monday, April 29th, 2024. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil for episode 280. Phil, jam-packed show today. We got the Bandits defeating the Georgia Swarm in Bandit Land in overtime to advance to the semifinals of the NLL finals, NLL playoffs, I should say. And the Buffalo Bills have a new draft class that we will briefly talk about at the second part of our episode. But Phil, are you fully recovered from a epic, heart-pounding, heart-racing, heart-stopping night in Banditland?
No, my voice is still a little off.
Scratchy.
My throat's still a little scratchy from yesterday, and the nerves have calmed for sure. But still pretty hyped, and the voice and throat have not recovered yet. I did not like it, and I would prefer they don't do that again. And as the game was winding down, I was like, my goodness, please do not go to overtime. And that is exactly what they did after some end of game dramatics. Didn't like it. Didn't appreciate it. If they could win by more than that, that would be much, much better. But it was a great game, a lot of fun, and still recovering quite a bit.
Yeah, we got a little too adjusted to those blowout victories the last couple weeks where we weren't used to these close-knit games like we had in the past. And I think we got a little bit full of ourselves, Phil, and we weren't ready for it. I mean, the last time it was a close game was Colorado, and that was, 3 or 4 weeks ago now? So, yeah, we kind of got to shape back up for playoff season. But note, before we get into this one, next Monday's show will not be out on Monday. It will be pushed to Tuesday because the Bandits have a Sunday game now. We're not going to come right back home, record. We like to digest it, get our stats and our numbers and our notes set up. So we'll be recording sometime Monday and be putting it out on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that one. But again, next Monday's show will be pushed to Tuesday. Regardless if they get swept, if they sweep, or they split it 1-1, our Monday show will be out on Tuesday. And then our second announcement here, because the Bandits advanced, I'm going to start that over. Because the Bandits advanced to the semifinals in their quest to win back-to-back championships. And because of this, our show will be having an official giveaway. It's the first one on this show. We did one on hypothetical history, but BSC, that's our first one. We will be giving away this replica ring right here. I'm holding it in my hand for Phil, since we still can't see each other. Right there. This replica ring that we did get. I have one of my own, but Brooke did not want hers, so I bought an extra one, and we will be giving that one away to one lucky fan of the podcast. Here is how you enter to be eligible to win this coveted prize. You need to be following us on Facebook, Instagram, or X. You need to listen to Monday's show right now, this show right here, where I will be giving away a secret code word. Not telling you when it's happening. I will just pop it in there at one point. I will let you know it is the secret code word. You need to take that secret code word and send us a DM on any of our social media sites with that secret code word. On top of that, after you send us that secret code, you get an extra entry into the giveaway by tagging one person or multiple people on our post that we will be putting out today on our own page. Tag that person who you think might enjoy this show. The giveaway will be closing on Thursday, May 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be announcing the winner on Friday's show. Good luck to everyone. Phil, I'm sorry, but you are ineligible to win the prize.
Well, that is depressing. For someone who, I'm not going to say doesn't handle, you do a good job, but as someone who does not like handling the social media aspect of our lives on this show, because we don't have anyone else to do it, I think this is going to be quite the interesting challenge for you. But I am excited about our first giveaway, especially for any fans that aren't season ticket holders that listen to our show that really haven't been given that opportunity to get one yet. This is a fun little way to get one for free. So, join. Good luck to everybody, and pretty fantastic first giveaway for our first ever giveaway on this show.
Yeah, we're not going to be like the people that are charging $300, $400, $500
No.
for championship ring. This one's completely free to enter. All you have to be doing is pretty much supporting our show, and
Which we
you
appreciate.
should be supporting our show if you want this giveaway. So there you go. Yeah. Any other questions on this? You can, and if you don't just follow along and take notes, we posted it in all the Facebook groups and on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter and X and all over the place. So you just got to read the rules there and be entered in to win this, once again, replica championship ring. It's not this one. The other one's boxed up. It's right here. It's unboxed, never opened. And for those that actually cared about it, it's got the orange rings on the sides. It's not all just white. It's got the orange on the outside. So even more important. But again, listen for the secret code word in this episode. Phil, let's dive into the game. Actually, before I do that, should probably tell you where to even find us. Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Phil's article is coming out tomorrow on Tuesday. My second playoff article is coming out on Thursday, and look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. Like we mentioned, Buffalo wins in overtime over Georgia. Josh Byrne, overtime winner, 10-9, the first playoff overtime win since Johnny Tavares won it in overtime back in 92 in the title game. Byrne had 5, Nanico, Kluch, McKay, Weiss, and Buchanan each chipped in 1. Vince was outstanding, 46 of 55 saves. Shots were 59-55 in favor of Buffalo. Faceoffs were pretty even, 12-11 in favor of Buffalo. Faceoffs, 4 for 4 for Buffalo, 2 for 4 for the Swarm.
I believe you mean power play on that second
power
one.
Play, yep.
That is
good call.
right.
Good call.
This is a safe space, I believe, because it's you and me, and it's our podcast, so it's going to be a safe space. And if it is a safe space, I'm going to admit that this game was ridiculously nerve-wracking, and I thought at 5-5, I felt like they were lucky to be 5-5 with the way they were playing in the first half. And then 8-5, I was like, okay, they clicked it. Everything's working, and we're good. Just, every time Georgia scores, make sure you have an answer, and you can cruise to victory. And then they went down 9-8 with 6 minutes to go after not scoring for a ridiculously long time. And I was like, all right, they are going to lose. They're going to lose this game. And it wasn't necessarily a biased fan inside me that just felt bad. I was like, oh, Georgia finally took the lead. Like, that's it. Like, the way the offense was playing, the way Dobson was playing, and the fact that they hadn't scored in a really long time had me extremely worried with 6 minutes to go. And then Bucky did what Bucky does, which is hustle like crazy, tied it up. And I was like, all right, like, the relief I had when he tied it was insane, because I really did not think they were going to be able to tie it. And then the Byrne goal, they didn't challenge in time, which was fine by the refs. They did not challenge it in time, but to see that go in and not be challenged was disheartening. And then Smith scoring 0.1 seconds too late. It was just, we talked about it after at the casino for our free money, that it just felt like it wasn't their night. Like, everything seemed to be going just slightly off for the Bandits, where it was just one of those things where they played a decent game, but this just, for some reason, wasn't in the cards, and it just wasn't it. Like, all those little things kept adding up, and you're just like, this isn't it. Like, this just is not their night. Georgia's going to come through with some kind of wild victory, and we're just going to be left depressed and kind of wondering what could have been. But Byrne decided to, cancel that notion in overtime, and such a big victory, and it was really exciting, but I did not feel good when it was 9-8 and Georgia was winning. It just felt really not completely hopeless, because I know the offense can score, and there was, still 6 minutes left, but it did not feel good.
Yeah, I mean, driving to the arena, I was like, Brooke, I have to tell you something. I do not feel good about this game whatsoever. And that was even before we got to the arena. It was just on the thruway driving down there. And I went, for some reason, I just got a gut feeling I do not feel good about this one. And like you said, the whole first half, it did not feel good. As soon as Georgia scored first, and it was one of those weird feelings. First shot, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those nights. It's just not going to be their night, and Dobson's going to steal it again. And it felt like it for the full first half. And then, it was tied 5-5 at half, like you mentioned, and then Buffalo would score the next 3 in the second half. And 2 were on that 5-minute major power play. And as soon as that major came out, I was like, this feels just like Toronto's game last year, where, Cole had to go to the box for this one. Rogers last year went to the box for 5, and Buffalo pulled ahead at that point. I went, okay, you took that 8-5 lead. You're feeling good. But then Georgia just would not go away. Buffalo's offense dried up. Georgia would score the next 4 to take that 9-8 lead until like you said, Bucky would score that tying goal with just about 6 minutes left in the game. And then Byrne would end it 4 minutes into overtime. But it definitely felt like a game where Buffalo's offense was not on if they weren't on the power play. And if Byrne was not shooting it, it felt like everything that I was saying about on Friday's show, where Georgia doesn't have an electric offense. You got to stay out of the box, and you can't let them score in transition game. That's pretty much exactly, if you were to take that soundbite and play it on a Georgia Swarm podcast by saying that about Buffalo, it felt exactly like what was keeping Buffalo in the game in the first half. Was the first 2 goals were the transition game. And then after that, Georgia couldn't stay out of the box, and Buffalo was staying in it because of the power play, and they extended the lead because of the power play. It definitely felt like all the advice and the thoughts that I had about Buffalo translated to the Georgia side. But, with this win, they got a date with Toronto on Friday, 7:30 in Hamilton. Then they got the home game Sunday at 5 p.m. If needed, the following Saturday is in Toronto at 7 o'clock. It's the 4th straight postseason, Phil, that these two teams are matching up. Buffalo is 3-0 in those series, and they're 5-0 in the games. Thank you, Dave Buchanan, for those numbers right there. But absolutely insane that even though these unified standings have come out, and I know we're going to dive into the game now, but East versus West is gone. Or I'm sorry, East side and West side are gone until you get to the finals. It's incredible that regardless of all this, it's still the same 2 teams in the semifinals. Once again, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's still fun for the other side to see Albany just on the other side of the bracket, and what would have been the former West, just to see the unified standings have kind of some kind of change to it. But like you just mentioned, this is essentially a East final once again. And like you said, I mean, for every little, I guess we'll say, nuance to line up, I mean, the Bandits were under 500 in the middle of the season. For them to storm back and be able to just sneak into that 4th place spot to then, have Toronto be first. And then this is the matchup you get once again. I mean, yes, last year it was flipped where Buffalo was the high seed and Toronto was the lower seed, but still, you once again at Buffalo and Toronto. But I don't know. Yeah, this game we'll get into the details, but even just the fact that every single time Buffalo scored, Georgia would score within pretty much a minute or less to just stay in it, stay right there. Like, the whole game just felt like...
You want those numbers, Phil? I got them right here.
I would love to hear it, because I didn't like any of it.
Yeah, 23 seconds, Georgia would take the 2-1 lead after Buffalo score. 49 seconds after Buffalo would score, Georgia would take the 3-2 lead. 55 seconds later, Georgia would tie it 4-4 after Buffalo took a 4-3 lead. And then after Buffalo took a 5-4 lead, Georgia would tie it 24 seconds later. So those times where you're sitting in the stands or watching from TV or wherever you are watching this game, you're going, man, Buffalo just can't keep any runs going. They can't keep any momentum. That's exactly it. 4 times Georgia would come back down to score, either to retake the lead or to tie it less than a minute later. It's insane how back and forth this game truly was. And that's the case, pretty much the whole weekend between, we'll go into those games in a bit, but Georgia and Halifax Albany and Halifax, and either Panther City and San Diego, the game right after Buffalo. That game was insane too, but this game was just back and forth the majority of the game. I mean, besides the 3-goal lead and the 1-goal lead by Georgia, it was clutch back and forth. There was not very many runs besides those 2, the 3-goal run by Buffalo and the 4-goal run by Georgia.
Yeah, and the only time it kind of flipped the other way, it seemed, was when the very end of the game, when Thompson scored to put Georgia up 9-8, and then Buffalo scored finally within a minute after that. I think it was possibly the next possession that they scored right back. I mean, that was the only time it really flipped. And then after that flip, it still took a long time to, get the game winning one, but finally they put it back to back again. So I don't know, just a crazy game, and I will let you start with the offense.
Yeah, it was another game where it seemed like, you had the top two dogs, Josh Byrne, 5, 1, and 6, and Dane Smith had 6 assists. And then the rest of the guys were also contributing. Nanico, 1, 2, and 3 on 4 shots. Kluch, 1 goal on 9 shots. Buchanan, 1, 1, and 2 on 4 shots. Frazier, 1 assist on 7 shots. So while the numbers aren't there that they were the past 2 games, it was a collective up there of everybody being involved. And that's the type of offense we want to see, whether they really were struggling to beat Brett Dobson, who you feel so bad for him if you're just an NLL fan watching these games, because he played his freaking tail off. He's going to be one of the top 5 or even possibly top 3 goaltenders in the league. He's the next wave of great players. Once, Nick Rose is getting up there. You have Dylan Ward in his 30s. You got Vincent in his 40s. So he is one of those next waves with like Nick DeMood, who you also feel for. But, it felt like he was trying to steal them the game. But McKay scores in transition to tie it 1-1. Weiss scores in transition. A great play between him and McKay running up there on the 2-on-1 to tie it 2-2. Byrne finally gets inside on a delayed call to snipe at 3-3. So technically they really were 5 for 5 on the power play if you take the man advantage situation there. Josh, 5-hole, heating up 4-3. The fifth one, it was the 4th or 5th try for Josh Byrne to score on the power play 5-4 to take the lead finally. You got Dane drawing the power play on what I personally thought should have been a 5 for the hit on the head. Nanicoke was leading the charge out there because I think they made Dane sit that one out, and then he was able to find Byrne inside for his fourth straight there to take that 6-5 lead. The 5-minute major that really was a 5-minute major was the 7th one. The 7th goal, Nanicoke causes the turnover in front of the net. He ends up getting it back later in the possession, goes ahead 7-5. Brandon Robinson goes to set the pick for what looks like it's going to be Dane Smith charged into the middle. He finds Kluch for the quick stick for the goal, 8-5 on the power play. Dane Smith takes the shot. Buchanan gathers it, like you mentioned, to tie it 9-9. And then, of course, we all know the laser beam in overtime for the 10th goal. But it was all the other intangibles that you really saw, where Kluch had 1 goal, but his caused turnover in overtime led to the game-winning goal for Josh Byrne. Nanicoke having to lead the charge in the power play. It was yes, the 2 top guys were leading the charge, but you got help, whether it's on the leaderboard, and the stats alone don't really prove it, but it was such a collection in the second half where the offense seemed to slowly be able to find ways to beat Brett Dobson.
Yeah, and the first 2 transition goals were interesting because both of them were off the pipe by Georgia and just happened to bounce straight to a Bandits player to get a great transition goal. So those are both, those situations where if it's a little bit better of a shot, it might be a goal, and instead it's a perfect deflection off the post right to the Bandits. But the offense, even though, somehow magically 10 goals was the highest score to the entire weekend, whatever the heck that was for the NLL, and wildly close games and just very low scoring weekend to open it. Very different from Buffalo's 20-goal thrashing of Rochester last year to open it up. But the offense, it just, not only did they seem just a little bit off, but they were getting good opportunities every once in a while, and they were just missing. Like, there were so many times where, like, McKay had an incredible diving shot that just went off the pipe. And there was another one, I think it was Cloutier was running from the left side to the right side and beat Dobson, just fired it wide. And then Buchanan had a few off the post, and other players had a few off the post. And even in overtime, Brandon Robinson got that incredible opportunity, and just, it was a good shot. It was a good play, but Dobson beat him. But there were so many times, like, how many times they hit the post? Like, they just hit it so many times. And again, that's something that we talked about, where a great goalie who's on his game will force you to kind of overthink and will force you to really try to pick those spots a lot more than you just kind of more naturally. When things are flowing, you just don't grip the stick quite as tight, and you're just letting it flow, and you just kind of trust yourself, like, okay, it's going to go to that spot. But when a goalie's playing really well, it forces you to try to hit that spot so much tighter and make sure you're really getting it on net. And I think that's the times that you hit those posts, because normally you're just not thinking about it quite as much, and it's, going to exactly where you want, and it goes in. But then when the goalie's playing well, it's a shot that normally would go in, goes off the post, and that happens so many times, especially at the end of the game. They just kept hitting post after post after post on these just great offensive setups. So yes, the offense only scored 10 goals. Yes, the first half was, I don't know what the heck they were doing. They just did not look like they were playing or wanted to get dirty. I don't know. They were staying to the outside. The first half was a very lackluster. I was not thrilled with the offense in the first half. They just, I mean, 2 of the goals was on transition, like you mentioned. So they didn't even really score that many in the first half themselves, but they're, lack of willingness to go to the dirty areas in the first half and get inside was just very low. I just didn't understand what they were really doing. They just didn't seem like they wanted to get inside all that much. But overall, I mean, yes, the offense didn't score a ton. I did think Dobson had a good game, but at the same time, I think the offense just, had they been a little bit more calm and just a little bit more free flowing like we've seen them, I think they could have scored a lot more goals that they just missed out on. But Georgia was doing the exact same thing where they hit a lot of posts themselves. So just one of those games where both offenses seemed to just a little bit off and just gripping it a little bit tight.
Yeah, I mean, talking about how close they were, there were 3 goals that were just almost goals that counted. I mean, Dane's foot was in the crease as the ball was crossing the line. Right. That one got reversed. We already talked about Josh Burns' goal that was challenged but not allowed because he was after. And if anybody has not read Phil's article about that explaining all these rules, go read that one. But to me, in that situation, I don't even know if this is allowed in the arena, but whoever is running the video boards needs to throw that type of replay up on the boards if it's close at all. I mean, who's ever running those video report reviews up top has to be quicker on that trigger and has to get it to the arena quicker, because if they would have gotten that up there, and I know there was after the whistle activities going on, so I can only excuse them so much for it, but that needs to be shown on the big screen, because if that was, the challenge would have been thrown in time. And then obviously the Dane one, as the time expires, it was just so close, and I think I might have been one of the first ones in the arena that saw it, and I went, it's not good. It's not good. And everybody around me is going, how is it not good? I was like, watch the replay. It's still not in the net when it hits double zeros, and it was so close. But yeah,
the
biggest negative
real quick for the burn one, I went back and watched it for the article late last night. Luckily, it was on demand already. But the second he takes that shot and the play's over, he is immediately pointing up, and Burn knew it went in. Like, he absolutely, the second he got through that crease and went to the other side, he immediately pointed up to the video board like, you need to throw the challenge flag. That went in. Go review it. And clearly, I don't know if he didn't get to the bench in time to tell them, or, I mean, like you said, there was no replay really shown, right. So it's hard to throw a challenge blindly, but it was one of those things where, I mean, Byrne knew it immediately, and really tough play to just trust your player in a playoff situation where, you know, that challenge, you might need it later. And luckily it ended up working out. But I mean, in a game this close, I mean, I don't blame Johnny, because that, again, that's just a really tight situation where, you know, you kind of want to save that, but at the same time, the game was winding down. You need that goal. So I don't know, maybe if you just trust your player in that situation. But the second that shot was done and bounced out, Byrne immediately pointed up, because I think he knew right away that did cross the goal line. But like you said, with no review, really hard to just kind of be like, oh, okay, let me trust my player 100% without actually seeing it. So fun to see Byrne know that it went in, but unfortunate for the Bandits that there was a huge scrum after the play, so they didn't really get a good look at what was going on.
So before we get into the negatives of this one, and I know we're going a little bit long, so we'll try to pick this up, let's get into our first secret word. No, our first sponsor, Phil, first sponsor of the show, Tap That Tap Room. Take it away.
I had to scroll so far down. There's so many notes in this one. Tap That Tap Room is at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York. They are Buffalo's first women-owned self-pour bar, where you go up, you get a glass, you pour as little or as much as you would like of the 30 consistently rotating taps. They offer a variety of seltzers, ciders, sours, malt beverages, and beer.
And Phil, we've been saying it for I don't know how long now, but you can now take that drink that you're either trying for the first time or it's your new favorite out on the patio. Yes, as of last Friday at 3 p.m., it is outdoor patio bev season. You can drink your new favorite drink out on the patio. It's going to be an absolutely lovely time, and bring your dogs because it is dog friendly. But they also have events coming up. Wednesday is more trivia starting at 7:30 with Geeks Who Drink. Phil and everyone else out there, check out their Facebook page for all their posted events and go to their website at tapthattaproom.com to see what is on tap and what is on deck. But Phil, let's dive into the negatives of this one. I didn't have a ton because we kind of already went over this. It just seemed like they couldn't or wouldn't get inside in the first half. That kind of changed towards the later half of the first half into the second half, but it was the goal droughts again this game that has been a problem. Yeah, it's been a problem all year long, and we've mentioned it. For the first 15-19, the goal drought was from goal 1 to 2, and that was just the transition game. No offensive goals from an offensive forward were scored in the first 24-53 of the game. That can't happen, regardless of who's playing net down there. That can't happen with this powerful of an offense. And then the next goal drought from the third quarter, where they scored on the power play, that they wrapped up the 5-minute major until Bucky's goal to tie it was 16-22. So you had two big runs there where it was just no goals whatsoever. And then you almost had a whole half of action where your offensive unit didn't score at all. This definitely needs to be addressed and worked on, because when you're going against Toronto coming up, their offense is more lethal than Georgia's, and their defense is even more lethal than Georgia's. So you're going against a unit that, yes, you've been able to beat Nick Rose constantly for the last, 5 matchups, but it's definitely is a tougher task going against the Toronto Rock. Starting away, this has not been a thing that Buffalo has had to worry about at all. Was game 1 on the road. You have to figure this out and be able to cut those goal droughts even less than in half, because even in half is not a good enough example of what you're looking for. They definitely, and this has been a sticking point for a while now, the goal droughts have to be worked out and have to be figured out. And I know when you can only control so much, because if the goaltender on the other side is playing unbelievable, you can only do so much, but it felt like because of their unwillingness or just inability to get inside, they were not helping the situation at all.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, when it was 8-5, I was starting to feel good. Not only because the offense scored 3 straight, they were all on the power play, so they weren't even strength, but it was just to see 8-5, knowing how Georgia's offense performs. I was like, okay, if the offense just matches Georgia the rest of the way, you're looking really good. Even if it's a 2-1, like Georgia scores 2, you score 1, that's fine. You're still okay for quite a bit, especially with Georgia only scoring 5 up to that point. Like, okay, if they get 4 more goals, you get 2. You're okay. Like, the game's okay. And then they didn't score, like you mentioned, for 16 minutes and allowed Georgia to score 4 straight to get all the way back in the game and take the lead. Like, that can't happen. It can't. Like, the entire game, I was like, offense, do something. Like, to score 4 of your 10 goals, 1 of them in overtime. So let's call 9 regulation goals. 4 of them were on the power play. That's 5 goals. And then 2 of those were transitions. So you're down to 3 even strength offensive goals. Like, for a team that's averaging over 13 goals a game, and I believe over 15 or 14 for the last 4 games of the season, and this is something we said before this game, was they have not really been tested these last few weeks. So what is it going to be like up against a tougher team, tougher competition, playoff atmosphere? Not necessarily that they can't live up to it, but they just, like we said a while ago, like they've been crushing teams to end the season. So what is it going to be like when they have to face some adversity? So in one way, I'm really glad to see this team come through this kind of game, because I think they needed a slap in the face a little bit to take a team like this to overtime and kind of just feel again like, okay, this, not only can we win a close game, but this is what a close game feels like again, because it had been a little while. But 3 even strength goals from your offense is just, it's not good for a team averaging 13, especially when, like you mentioned earlier, if Byrne wasn't on one and didn't put up 5, like, yes, the secondary scoring did help in multiple different ways. And yes, you'd expect the scoring title NLL player to possibly help your team and score 5 goals. That's what they do. They put the team on the back. And even Smith, assist record, got the 6 assists. Like, those 2 guys still came out and did amazing. That's what you would expect the 2 top scorers in the NLL to do. But I don't know, it did not feel good having them score that little. And a lot of that is just those goal droughts are just, they look so bad for a team, like you said, that's just this talented on offense. To be consistently fighting with goal droughts the entire season just seems so strange that they cannot seem to just consistently score. And then when they do score, they put it in bunches. So I don't know what happens and what switches and what flips. I don't know if they're making in-game adjustments where, they go 15 minutes of something isn't working. They switch it up a little bit and all of a sudden they score 3, 4, 5 goals in a row. And they're like, okay, there we go. But like you said, going up against Toronto, it's going to be even worse, and that needs to be fixed.
So let's switch over to the defense here. I thought the defense played really, really well in this one. The transition game alone kept them in it in the first half, scoring those first 2 goals. But, the big shocker for Georgia was not having Seth Oakes in the lineup. And I know I was mentioning him on the Friday show, just going, hey, he is a guy that can score goals in bunches. And going into the arena, seeing that he is a scratch, I was like, oh, okay, if you want to scratch Oakes, maybe he got hurt in warmups, maybe he got hurt in the shoot around, don't know. But he was not on the injury report going into this game. But his replacement, Miles Thompson, 0-0-0, 3 assists or 3 shots on net. Lyle Thompson, they were able to keep him contained, 2, 3, and 5 on 12 shots. Bomberry killed him though with three goals, 1 assist, 4 points on just 4 shots. So he was shooting 75% in this one. Jackson 4 assists, Q 3, 2, and 5 on 15 shots. Cole had an assist on 5 shots. Kiernan 1 assist on 5 shots. So I thought they did a really, really, really good job locking some of these players down. It felt like a game where this was more of, and we'll dive into it in the goalie section, it felt more like a game where there was at least, in my opinion, 3 that Vince should have had. But there were some areas of the game where the defense needs to improve, and we'll get into that in a second. But, Wires 2 block shots, Dawson 2 block shots and a caused turnover, Dylan Robinson a caused turnover, Bomberry 2 block shots, Weiss 2 block shots and a caused turnover, Martin block shot and caused turnover, Priolo caused turnover, Belter caused turnover, 10 block shots, 7 caused turnovers total for the whole collective of the team. I thought this was another game where you're going against a foe that was better than Vegas, better than Calgary on the offensive side, and they were still able to lock it down and play really, really well. And like we said, the whole first half, it felt like the defense was keeping the offense in it, and we hadn't seen that pretty much all year long since maybe the beginning of the game or the beginning of the season where they lost 9-8 versus Georgia, or only allowing 8 versus San Diego, or one of those early games where they're only allowing 8 versus Colorado earlier in the season too. So it definitely was a game. And what's even more interesting about this is, and I would have to go look at the previous stats before you arrived, but the switchover for these block shots for when Paul Dawson was inserted into this lineup. And yes, he only had 2 of the 10 block shots and 1 of the 7 caused turnovers, but I don't know if it's just his attitude on the field or his willingness to step in front of those shots is just wearing off on other players now. But it seems like this defense has flipped the switch, and maybe it's just because they're all collectively there now, but their willingness to lay their body in front of these shots now is something that I hadn't seen in the first half of the season that I have seen since Paul Dawson has gotten into the lineup. And maybe that's just an overblown statement that this is not any different than what it was in the beginning of the season, but it definitely feels like the defense has stepped up their game, blocking these shots and keeping Vince, with less shots on his older body and in net there.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things you mentioned, which is a really great point about the defense just as a whole, is that it did allow the offense to stay in the game, the team to stay in the game, and allow the offense the time to kind of fix it, even though I still don't know if they really did. But again, they had a lot of good opportunities. They were just missing. So I know I'm harping on the offense a lot, but I do think in the end they were a little bit better than the goals suggest, and I do think Dobson played really well. So, but to see the defense allow the offense time to get it together. I mean, Byrne didn't really click until, a little bit later in the game. Then once he got it going, he really got it going. But the defense was absolutely what kept them in the game early on. Like you said, the transition as well. And even though Thompson finished with 2, 3, and 5, he looked frustrated the entire game. They just seemed to be all over him in the best ways. Even the goals he did score really weren't that impressive. They were kind of lucky, in my opinion. So he didn't do any of his magical things that we know he can do, and his abilities are incredible, but he was contained really, really well. Bomberry, to me, was the one that hurt them the most. Like you mentioned, 3 goals on 4 shots. He had Vince's number, knew how to score, and the defense was not doing the best job getting out in his face, and they allowed him time and space a few too many times, and he just knew exactly how to score on Vince in this game. Q, pretty similar, but overall, I thought the defense did a really good job. Once again, the big thing to me between this game and the last game is that when they were out there and looked good, they were smothering again. They were just right in everybody's face, the entire team. You know, if the guy had the ball, didn't have the ball, whatever, they were just all on players the entire time and just did not allow the other team time and space. And when they did, they scored. But outside of those few times, they did a really good job just closing everything down, getting sticks in the lane for passes, blocking shots, like you mentioned. Like everything just looked really good again as a collective unit. Yes, they had a few breakdowns. To me, I think I had 3 goals against the defense and 2 against Vince. But overall, really, really good job. And they did a nice job clamping down when they needed to.
Yeah, we can kind of go over the negatives now. You kind of mentioned one of them was I thought there was too much time and space allowed on a few occasions, and we can go over it a bit.
All 3 I had against the defense, I think, were too much time and space for the shooter. So
100%. Yeah, I mean, even defensive wise, there was a few too many bad passes that led to turnovers and chances on the other end. But we'll dive into those in a second. But the first goal, Bomberry, kind of slips through Vince's arms. I thought that one was one that Vince probably should have had, that first goal one there. Dawson kind of loses his man. Q right in front of the net, scores to make it 2-1. I felt that one was on Dawson there. McKay and Dylan Robinson, nobody really closes out on Lyle. That was one of those time and space ones. It was 3-2. Priolo turnover in transition. You know, it felt like Dylan Robinson kind of got pushed out of the play there, and Henrik was able to pinpoint shot a 2-on-1 there to tie it 4-4. Again, McKay, way too much space on Bomberry. Tries, you know, once again, they tie it right before halftime, 5-5. Penalty kill on the 6th goal was way out of sorts. They were scrambling a lot, 8-6. The 7th goal, Bomberry over Vince's shoulder again. I thought that one was another one Vince should have had. Q, top of the power play, point, you know, pinpoint shot, 8-8, and then the 9th one, Lyle 5-hole, just sneaks by Vince. I thought he should have had that one as well. You know, Georgia taking that 9-8 lead. That one definitely was one that took the air out of the building. But I personally had 3 on Vince. I think the 7th one that went over Vince's shoulder, you probably didn't have. But yeah, the ones that I thought were on the defense was mostly due to either the turnover in the transition game or just too much space left to those shooters.
Yeah, the 7th goal I had on the defense because I watched that one a lot of times. Honestly, I just, that was one I rewound probably 6 or 7 times to figure out what the heck happened. The defense allowed Bomberry to literally walk in and take that shot. He had so much time and space and literally ran at Vince for a really long time. Nobody got in his face. And so I watched it a lot to see like where was the confusion, who screwed up. And it was honestly confusing. It was between Belter, McKay, and Martin. Martin eventually, after the goals pretty much scored, runs over to try to get to Bomberry. He missed completely. McKay's in the middle front of the net guarding nobody. He had just no one on him. He was just guarding right in front of the net. I don't know, waiting for someone to get inside. I think he got kind of lost. He had no one he was marking. And then Belter did a good job with what he was supposed to do. I think he had Bomberry, I think, originally, and then passed him off to go take someone down low. And then it was Priolo and Martin on a guy way up top. So I think Martin was supposed to slide over to Bomberry, but got over there way too late. And then McKay just literally had nobody he was covering. There was no one behind the net. Everyone was in front of him. So I think there was just a ton of miscommunication on that play from those 3 main players. But it just seemed like it was very out of sorts. And Bomberry walked really far in before, and he wasn't challenged at all on that play. So Vince, I mean, the only reason
I'll give you that one then.
Yeah, and then even the way, again, Bomberry was shooting, he knew exactly where to shoot on Vince that whole game, whether it was over that left shoulder, or I think that one might have been the one that he snuck in on the right side. I think Vince even kind of anticipated him going to the left, and that time he snuck it in on the other side to really throw it off. But Bomberry just had his number. But yeah, the defense on that one, I watched it so many times to try to figure out what the heck happened, and it was tough. It was tough to figure out who was truly at fault. But I think the whole defense was just a little bit off as far as coverage goes, and Bomberry just walked in all by himself. And I was like, well, that's not the guy you want shooting open on Vince in this game right now.
Yeah, before we dive into the goalie and the miscellaneous stuff, which won't take that long to wrap up this episode, let's dive into our second sponsor here, Mr. Sizzles. Phil, scroll down that docket and take it away with our second sponsor of this show.
Mr. Sizzles is at 346 Connecticut Street in Buffalo, New York. They will have 2 new locations opening up soon. They are currently open 7 days a week, 11 to 11, with a brunch menu on Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3. Our buddy Mike was there supporting our sponsor and the podcast before the Bandits game. Last game, he was having a great time at Mr. Sizzles.
And what he's going to have even a better time is tomorrow at 11 a.m., the new menu will officially be released. Phil, got a question for you. Have you seen and looked it over yet?
I have, and there are a lot of new items that look really, really good, and there's an entire new section that is new to them that looks fantastic, and I know a few of our friends are going to be psyched when they see it.
Yeah, we're not going to spill the beans at all. We will let them handle that, but we have seen it. I can't wait for the public to see it when it's first made live tomorrow, but there are so many delicious items on there. I know they have teased 2 so far, the fried bologna one and the new blueberry biscuits one. But if you thought those 2 were good, wait till you see what else is on this new menu coming out again tomorrow at 11. We'll have plenty of more new items that we can post and talk about on this podcast, but I really can't wait for it. So if you are just as interested as us, you can check out their menu on their socials or at mrsizzles.com. Look for that new menu again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Can't wait for everybody else to see what we got to see. But let's move forward to the goalie department here. I thought Matt Vince played really, really well. And to call him out on 2, and I called him out on 3, but really the 2 goals that I thought he should have had back, those were the first 2 I've had in 2 or 3 games that I truly thought were on Matt Vince. It's unbelievable how well he has played and how well he has performed since coming back from that injury. Off the Bomberry, horrible turnover. Vince makes a massive breakaway save right before the final timeout of the first half. He had another big 2-on-1 save to start the fourth quarter. He is another big reason in those big time saves that, yes, he was letting a lot of goals that went in over his shoulders, but that's been a common theme his entire career. So you can't really... He's taken up the rest of the net. Every goalie has one area that's a weak spot. His just happens to be over his shoulders. Big deal. He comes up in the clutch when he needs to and makes those big saves when he needs to. And he did it again in this game where, again, I thought the first, the 7th, and the 9th goal, and you explained the 7th, so take that away. But at first and 9th goal, I thought he should have had just because of the quality of goalie he is. And I think looking back, I think he would probably tell you the same thing. He should have had the first and the 9th goal. I thought those were squeakers. But honestly, another game where you allow less than double-digit goals. He's on a run of 3 straight games of that, along with the defense. I thought that if you're going to get this type of performance from Matt Vince, this team can repeat and become back-to-back champions.
Yeah, and 2 of those were on the power play, and then another 2 they were able to kill. So, I mean, even those opportunities, like when they don't score on the power play, a lot of that is the goalie. And when I was rewatching the game, the commentators even said, like, your best power play defender obviously on the penalty kill is your goalie. Like, he is your number 1 chance of stopping that team. And I mean, 2 for 4 isn't amazing by the penalty kill, but the Bandits went 4 for 4, and that ended up being arguably the difference in the game. So he still did really well. And that save that you mentioned on Bomberry, the breakaway save, I mean, it's those big saves that we were missing in the beginning of the season that he's really starting to lock in on. And that's the one that I was going to call out as well. And yes, I do agree with you. 1st and 9th goal, he should have. I'm sure he knows he should have them as well. So if you would ask him, like you mentioned, I'm sure he wants those back. But overall, he's looked really, really good. He's saved all the ones for the most part that he needs to save. He's coming up with big saves. I was terrified in overtime because it's overtime. But the first shot, I believe it was by Q, that they had a really good opportunity for. I honestly thought it was going to be a game winner. I think Q had a good idea as well of where to shoot on Vince, and the team kind of let him get away and let him shoot right down the middle, right up top, exactly where you don't want to happen. And then Vince made a huge save on that one. And even Thompson with his second shot of overtime, he's a very sneaky player, tried to sneak it in down low, and Vince had that one smothered up as well. So very scary to see them shoot ever in overtime, no matter how Vince is playing. Overtime's horrifying. I do not like it. But he came up really big with those 2 saves, and then that ended up leading to the goal in the end. I think it was after the Thompson shot. That was the last shot by Georgia. So really, really good game by Vince. Thought he played really well. And like you mentioned, he's been just locked in for a while. And if he can continue playing like this, they have every chance to go all the way.
Yeah, so just a couple cleanup things here. I thought the good part of this game, Farrell winning it when he needed to. He won the one right before half to set up the Bandits again. They didn't end up scoring, but he did give them the opportunity there, and then he won the first faceoff in overtime. Those are the opportunities, and that is when we say that faceoffs truly matter, and that's when it's nice to have somebody in their back pocket that can win those. Now, he's going against T.D. Erlin next week versus Toronto. Much better faceoff man than Jeremy Thompson is, and Farrell did struggle in this one. I thought Jeremy Thompson was, equal to what Farrell was. So we'll see what Farrell can.
Not to cut you off, it was just because it was 7-5 in the first half in favor of Thompson and 7-4 in the second half in favor of Farrell. So perfect. I do think after a pretty rough first quarter, he started to figure out what he needed to do, and then the ones he was winning, it was that clamp style flip to himself, which was also good. They weren't really scrambling. Like, he was truly winning them. So it was good to see him make that adjustment. TD Erlin is, like you said, a different beast, though. So we'll see how that goes.
Still has to figure out what to do as soon as he wins it, though.
Yeah, no idea.
He's a little bit of a lost dog in that situation. But a couple bad ones. I thought it was a horrible, horrible call. And I'm not trying to bash the refs whatsoever. There's plenty of other people that'll do it. I thought they had a very weird and
did not like
unusual game. I don't think it was inconsistent. I think it was just they were calling it the same for both teams, and you can't say they weren't. But I just thought that some of the calls were head scratchers. It was a horrible call on Dylan Robinson. He literally waited and timed it perfectly to hit Q. It was a clean hit. He waited till Q had the ball, and he dislodged the ball. Those are the type of hits you want in the game. I thought Hendricks, that one that they got called for a 2 for a shot to Dane Smith's head, that should have been a 5. Those are the type of things you're trying to take out of the game. Then I thought Cole's should have been a 2 instead of a 5. So in the end, they do get the 5 and the 2 in the end, but I thought those two should have been reversed. And then the only other bad one that's not even the refs, Nick Weiss, man, what the heck are you doing? Like, at the end of the game, I don't care that they have the ball and they're holding on to the ball. What are you doing cross-checking the guy from behind? You're about to get the ball and the opportunity to win the game with 6 seconds to go. He could have been called and thrown in the box for that. You give Georgia not just the power play at the end of the game, but if they don't score, they go into overtime on the power play. It's not smart from a veteran player who is an assistant captain. He needs to be better than that. And I think Priola was talking to him. I think Matt Vince was talking to him at the end of the game. That was just a downright stupid play he did that could have cost the team, and they would have been sent home packing if that would have came back to haunt them. It was just a very dumb decision at the end of the game there from one of your veteran defenders.
Yeah, I'll try to sprint through this. I go over it a lot in my article, but I wasn't happy with the refs in this one, and like we talked about, it's on both teams. It wasn't necessarily all in favor of, Georgia or anything. I thought the refs were just bad. I thought they just refereed a bad game, and it was for both teams. This isn't they did it. They missed a ton of calls for the Bandits. The Bandits were being wild in what they were doing, and I thought the refs were just honestly terrible. Like, they were missing so many calls for both teams. Nick Weiss punched a guy in the face right in front of the ref. It wasn't called. I mean, Fraser, I don't even know what we want to call it. I guess we'll say punch Dobson a little below the belt there, and that wasn't called at the end of the game. And then Fraser, for some reason, is again upset toward the end of the game where Nanakoke cross-checked a guy from the back who was going for the ball, and then Fraser trucked another guy to the ground. Like, there were just so many weird things that could have been called, and Weiss and Fraser, to me, both of them need to get their heads checked before this next game, especially in a brutal rivalry with Toronto. Like, they were just doing so many stupid things that you could tell were out of anger and frustration that they cannot do in playoffs. They need to get their head right. Like, you can't just punch a guy in the face. Luckily, Weiss got away with half the stuff he got away with. I don't even know how he did. And then Fraser, same thing. He was doing a lot of stuff that really should have been called, and he was lucky to get away with a lot of it as well. So I thought the refs were not good, but it was for both teams. I thought they were just bad. But the Bandits, especially Weiss and Fraser, you got to calm down and play much, much more level-headed in this next game. If they start calling any of that stuff, which I thought they should have, you're going to be in trouble pretty quick.
Yeah, my only thought is maybe having game one on the road could be a blessing because they won't have, close to 18,000 Bandit land right behind them, getting them amped up. Yep, it'll be on the road. But Phil, do you think it's time to give away this secret code word?
Yeah, I think we can do it right before your milestone minute.
Okay, again, we went over the rules and I'll go over them at the end and they're on our social media sites. But here is your secret code word to be entered in to the giveaway for this right here. Beautiful replica championship ring that's also been behind me on the TV the entire time. Phil and everybody else listening, the secret code word is RAX. RAX. The secret code word is RAX. RAX. Make sure you DM us on any of our social media sites. That is the only way to be entered in to the giveaway for, once again, this
and the other rules.
Deluxe replica, one of a kind, or one of however many there are out there, unopened ring. Again, that one's mine. Yours is the unopened one right here in this box. Phil, let's dive into our milestones. Here we go. Plenty of them happened. Thank you. Dane Smith did cross the 100 mark for career playoff assists. Ian McKay did cross the 100 loose ball mark for his playoff career, and Dane Smith also crossed the 100 loose ball mark for his playoff career. Dane Smith moved into fourth place in Buffalo Bandits history in games played. Chase Frazier, Justin Martin, and Matt Vince all played and moved into eighth place in Buffalo Bandits playoff history. Cal Buchanan did tie Micah Kersey and Rich Kilgore for seventh place in Buffalo Bandits history. In assists, Tehoka Nanako did pass Rich Kilgore for ninth place in Buffalo Bandits history. Kyle Buchanan tied Roger Weiss he passed Roger Weiss for 10th place in Buffalo Bandits history with 2 points that one. Nick Weiss did pass Jay Thornberry for 6th place in Buffalo Bandits playoff history in loose balls. John Tavares now has the most playoff wins in Buffalo Bandits coaching playoff history. Steve Priolo did pass, and I should make sure that he did tie. I don't think he tied Brody Merrill, so he's still behind Brody Merrill because I forgot Brody Merrill was playing, but 3rd place in NLL playoff history, so he still might be in 4th. I'll double check that for next show.
I was going to ask which player just returned from retirement. I thought it was Brody Merrill, and you called yourself out. You got it.
I got it.
Pretty incredible. And we talked a lot about this where, if you're a good team and you make playoffs a lot and get really deep, that's how you get a lot of these things. But a lot of that is coaching, and the fact that John Tavares already, who has not coached that many seasons whatsoever, already has the most playoff wins in Buffalo Bandits playoff history is ridiculous. That he is on his way to not only being one of the greatest players of all time, but one of the greatest coaches of all time. What can that guy not do?
Brody had 6, so that's still the same. It's like it never happened. Steve Priolo's still 6 away.
Washed it away.
So let's quickly go over the NLL outlook. I know we're about 50 minutes in here, and we still got the Buffalo Bills to talk about. But a couple of games did happen, shockingly, quarterfinals of the NLL playoffs. Number 8, Rochester went to the number 1 Toronto Rock, trying to upset them. The Rock were up 6-3 at halftime, and they continued that into the end of the game. And Toronto won 9-6. Panther City taking on San Diego. Personally, I thought this was one of the best games. If I wasn't in attendance for Banditland, I would have said this was the best game because it was just back and forth the whole way. It was pretty much either one team was winning by 1 or it was tied the whole game. San Diego walks away victorious 9-8 in overtime. Dobie scores 2:49 in overtime after missing what seemed to be a clear-cut goal. He gets it right back at the same possession and ends it. And then Halifax tries to finally get out of the first round. It does not work. They go absolutely extinct in this one. Albany walks away 9-3 victorious on Sunday. The young rookie, and I shouldn't say, the young team of the Albany Firewolves advance and takes on San Diego in the semifinals. Buffalo gets the Rock, but man, Phil, some absolute defensive studded performances with great goaltending this weekend where we saw the offenses just disappear.
Yeah, we'll talk about Withers in a moment. I haven't watched it yet, but with his attitude and antics, he is slowly falling away from being one of my favorite players. Might just have to go back to the courier of things. But the defense, like I mentioned, I mean, the Bandits took all the way to overtime to get to 10, and that was the highest scoring team of the entire weekend, which seems just mind-blowing and pretty depressing. I mean, obviously happy as a Bandits fan that Dobson came up on the losing side, but he played really, really well. Damoud, my other young goalie that I like quite a bit, played really, really well. Felt really bad for him as well. I mean, to allow saves. Only 8 goals in all of regulation against San Diego was a good team. Just really unfortunate for him. I mean, both of those goalies played extremely well. I don't know what we didn't really talk about this, and we're running super long, so I'm not going to really get into it. But I don't know what Byrne was so upset with Dobson about, but he was chirping like crazy at him. I do not know what was said between. They seemed like they were very friendly at the end of the game during the handshake. Obviously, it's good for Byrne when the Bandits win and he scores the overtime winner, but he was not happy with Dobson. But I thought Dobson and DeMoon, like you mentioned, really defensive over, just games. And then Albany 9-3. What a strange looking game. Halifax with one of the better offenses in the entire league all season to put up 3 goals. Really depressing effort from them. I mean, what a weird looking playoff score, but good for Albany, young team advancing. And like you said, another just really impressive goaltending by just every single team this week.
Yeah, we'll have all offseason to talk about him, and we can go into more details then. But Halifax, man, they got to blow it up. This is the 3rd straight season they have not been able to advance out of the quarterfinals, and they can't even blame Toronto this time like they did the past 2 years because they didn't even face them. They faced an Albany team who and at the end of the game, Jake Withers just being a total what, and then David Brock trying to get in the crowd to fight too. It's just everything came unraveled in Halifax, and I think that I don't know if there's going to be a coaching change, but something needs to change in an organization, whether it's the core and just switching up. But this is 3 straight seasons of a team that's capable of advancing out of a quarterfinals, and they can't do it. So they're going to have to blow that up. But like we said, we'll go over the semifinals on the next show. We'll break down the Buffalo Bandits game versus the Toronto Rock and, kind of take a quick overview look at the Seals versus the Firewolves, because whoever wins that one will be going to the finals. But Phil, the Buffalo Bills did have a new draft class, and who would have thought out of the 10 picks that the Buffalo Bandits had coming in, they might not have used all of those 10 going in, but they did draft 10 new players. We're not going to go over every single one of them. We've said over multiple episodes here that there are plenty of other Buffalo Bills dedicated shows that break down this far better than we ever could. We're just going to give our opinions on it, but plenty of trades. The initial days, they in total here, Phil, they moved, and I won't go over each individual trade because again, there's so many podcasts out there and so much coverage of this team, but in the end, they give up pick 28, 133, 144, 163, 200, and 248, and they get back 33, 95, 141, 168, 219, 221, and a 4th next year. I thought for a grand scheme of things, and I can't be super mad because they got their wide receiver, but what was your overall thoughts on and you can't get mad, and I know that's the first comment you're going to say is you stayed up all Thursday to watch them not pick. But what was your overview thought on what they were able to do in this draft class and bringing in the players that they did?
I think it all just hinges on Coleman. I mean, pretty much this whole draft does. I mean, I liked what they did in the later rounds. I thought everything else outside of Coleman was great. But if he does not hit, I would have much rather preferred them finally be... I can't say finally. He's moved up 4 times in this in his drafting. He's been pretty aggressive in the first round, moving up to get the player he wants. But with Thomas falling and the way he fell, how far he fell, I was really hoping and expecting the Bills to try to move up to get him because he seemed like a more complete wide receiver who could truly be their next wide receiver 1. And they just traded back and all the way out of the first in general. So really surprising and honestly frustrating to see them not go after Thomas, who seemed like a more complete prospect. But if Coleman hits, then the rest of this draft class I thought was really good. They hit on a lot of depth positions. They hit on a lot of things that they needed, like safety, a few offensive linemen, a few, potential future center, a nice edge that looks like he's going to be good rotational. Overall, the running back to complement Cook. So the back half, I thought they did great, and I like most of what they got. And obviously, my favorite player is going to be Clayton, coming from rugby, because why not? I like the international transfer player that doesn't really mean anything to the roster except maybe 2 years, and he is a mountain of a human, which we do enjoy quite a bit. But I think this entire draft class hinges on Coleman. I mean, no matter how great the other ones are, if Coleman fails to be a great wide receiver or even a decent wide receiver in a year where you really need one, I think that's going to be painful, especially if a player like Thomas, who you were, I believe, 5 spots away from in the draft, ends up hitting. That's going to be frustrating. And the offseason is still really long. They could make a trade. They could go out and sign someone. I don't know if anyone's really left to sign. I doubt it, but they could make a trade to bring someone else in to complement this entire situation. So if that happens, then, none of this conversation matters. But if they go in with the wide receiver core they have, it's nothing against Coleman. It's not that I don't like him, and I think he could be good. He has the abilities, but he's just not quite as complete and exciting of a prospect as someone like Thomas was, who they were only 5 picks away from. Would have liked to see them finally get aggressive for a wide receiver and go up and get him, but instead they trade all the way out and grab Coleman. So, I mean, I'm happy they at least went with a wide receiver as their first pick in the second round, but we'll see how it all kind of pans out.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about each individual player like we have in the past. Like I said, multiple times now, and multiple times on this show. There's other podcasts and stuff that you can listen for that.
The Georgia game was just too exciting.
I'm going to look at it as more of a what did these certain picks tell me about the team? And I think there's two aspects here. And I agree with you. I wish they would have went up and picked Thomas, but who am I? I haven't really watched and I haven't really scouted all these players, so I can only talk about what I see and what these moves prove to me. And besides, we're going to be worrying about Worthy and we're going to be worrying about Leggett for their entire careers, because if they pan out, it's going to be another Patrick Mahomes situation where we're never going to be able to see the end of it. But if Coleman pans out, it's even better, because if Worthy pans out, it's the situation with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, where Patrick Mahomes, yes, you won the Super Bowls, but Josh Allen is an electric quarterback as well. But this whole thing has kind of taught me two things. One, them not willing to go up and trade to try and get Thomas tells me one big thing here. And I guess two big things here. One, that Brandon Beane was very unwilling to move any 2025 picks. You saw how many trades he's made in this one. None of them involve next year's picks. So to me, that's telling me that he might not think that this team that they currently have right now is Super Bowl caliber, because they're going to have so much money next year. They already have so many picks next year. I think next year is going to be the year that they load up and try to make another run at the Super Bowl. I think this is a nice transition year for them, where they're still going to win the division. They're still going to go in the playoffs. As long as you got Josh Allen, they have a chance. But I think this is a year where it's more about figuring out what they are and the pieces that they have to build their next core and moving forward. But the second piece here is they were talking about he doesn't know if Coleman's going to even be a starter. He's going to be going in there trying to earn a starting spot. To me, that's saying, and what I kind of feared was seeing how uninvolved and this numbers that Stefon Diggs put up in the later half of the season and into the playoffs, where he just wasn't having those numbers. I'm afraid that they're going off the belief of that and the belief of what Kansas City did last year, but they didn't have a true number one. Guess what? They still had a true number one in Travis Kelce. So that's what I'm worried about, is this team doesn't believe that they need a true number one like a Stefon Diggs, like an A.J. Brown, like a Justin Jefferson to be a competitive Super Bowl winning team, because they saw Kansas City do it. They saw what they were able to do without one, or quote unquote, without using one last year. Those are the two aspects that I saw out of this draft, where they didn't want to move up to get one of those star-studded top 3 wide receivers. They were willing to move back to get their guy, and they were unwilling to move next year's picks. It just seems like they're in a transition year, and they don't believe they need a true number one. Those are the two things that I grasped out of this type of class. But again, I like all the draft picks. I didn't scout them all, but I like the positions they're playing in. I like all the talk about them, because I listen to those podcasts and I listen to the talk on them. So I also follow those podcasts that I'm trying to tell you to go listen to. But it's definitely it's going to be an interesting rest of the season, off season, I should say, in what this team looks like next year, because I'm in the belief, and I fully believe they're going to say we're Super Bowl contending teams and we're still number one goal is to end up winning that Super Bowl. I just don't think that they are truly believing that this is a team can get it all done unless everything works out perfectly for them.
Yeah, and I think this will be, like you mentioned, it's almost like an experimental year. And I think the wide receiver one, assuming they make no trades in the offseason still for some of those guys that are still out there, assuming that doesn't happen, they don't really go in with the wide receiver one, especially with Coleman being just 20 years old, if they don't think he's even a starter. I think it's going to be a big experiment to see, A, like you said, do we need one? And B, what did Stephon Diggs draw in cover that isn't really
Yep.
shown on film, which you've brought up a few times. And I think it's a great point. Like everyone's like, saying that, yeah, Diggs had a really bad second half when Brady came in, and like, okay, so we can just run with that. We don't need him anymore. But he still took the top cornerback away from all the other options, which leaves people a lot more open. If Curtis Samuel is your number one wide receiver taking the cornerback, how many more guys are actually open? So it'll be interesting to see if if this is the team they run it with. I do agree with you. I don't know if they necessarily believe they can take it all the way. At the same time, you have Josh Allen. Anytime you have him and the defense that we saw toward the end of the year last year, especially if Milano comes back healthy, especially if any of these players that they drafted can be rotational players or important players to the team and just, kind of take that defense another step forward, especially with a lot of those younger players getting another year of experience as well. I mean, the defense could keep this team in games long enough to allow an incredible quarterback like Josh Allen to get just enough points to win. Like you said, probably going to win the division or at least have a good chance at it. Might make playoffs again. Who knows how much noise they'll make in playoffs, but do they believe it's truly a Super Bowl contending team while they have no cap space and can't really do much? Hard to say, and obviously they're not going to admit that, but like you mentioned, the moves they made kind of prove that, and I think it was impressive to trade away a fifth this year for next year's fourth. That was a fun little move he was able to do, but it seems like you said, this is kind of a transition, reload year. Get rid of the old core, reset your salary cap, and move on next year to try to load up again and make another run.
So, Phil, that pretty much wraps up this episode. Is there anything else you would like to add to it before we shut it down and get ready for our preview for another heart racing semifinals coming up this weekend?
I mean, I want them to win, and if they have to do it in overtime, they can do it in overtime, but I did not like it, and I was happy they did it, but yeah, heart racing, terrifying. I don't like NLL overtime.
So on our next show, we will be talking about the BSC Award show for the Buffalo Sabres. Can't wait for that. Producer Pat is busy working on the graphics and stuffing the envelopes with the winners, so we can announce those on the next episode. And, of course, we will be breaking down both Game 1 and 2 for the Buffalo Bandits versus the Toronto Rock 4.0. 4 straight seasons of this. Yeah, we don't have to really go over the players because we know the Toronto Rock and who they have and
they know
what they're all about. Yeah, it's gonna be a bloodbath this weekend. But don't forget about our giveaway for this beautiful replica championship ring that we will be giving away and announcing the winner on Friday's show. Once again, make sure that you are following us on all the social media sites we're about to mention and send us that secret code word that I said on this episode. I'm not saying it now and I'm not telling you when I said it because then you'll just skip to it and listen to it and you won't actually listen to the show. And that's the point of this. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Thank you to Mr. Sizzles and Tap That Tap Room for sponsoring this episode and this show. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Remember, Phil's article is dropping tomorrow, breaking down this electric game that just was Buffalo versus Georgia, and then my playoff reaction to round 1 and looking at round 2 will be out on Thursday. Follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure you leave us that review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.